Good evening. It is 6:30. Members of council are assembled when you're ready to begin.
Okay, thank you, Don. I'd like to call to order this regular council meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores. Welcome all members and everyone watching us via the live stream. We're glad everybody's with us. Second item on the agenda is a land acknowledgement, and I'll read that this evening. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for the contributions they have made in both caring for the land and in shaping this community. We commit to truth and reconciliation, to acknowledging the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people, and we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward on a path to healing along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. Third item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments, and no minutes to adopt. No public meeting either this evening, so we'll roll all the way down to our reports of municipal officers and committees. And the first one is affordable housing on town-owned lands policy. And I'll turn that over to the manager of development services.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. And this is a continuation of what was introduced in about a month ago. At that time, we introduced, I guess, what are they? 7 principles for the town to develop into a policy that they can objectively, efficiently, effectively identify and use town-owned land for affordable housing. And as a reminder, those principles that were introduced were, number 1, to optimize the affordable housing that's provided on those lands. Number 2 is to ensure that the accommodation is for low and moderate income households. Number 3, that's sort of a long-term impact as opposed to short-term. Number 4 is that we're trying to minimize town cost. Number 5, that we address our land use planning and urban design objectives and policies and guidelines. Number 6 is that it's a consultative process with the community, the affected neighborhood, as well as the affected target occupants of housing, so whoever they may be. And then finally is that to ensure that the housing being built is done by competent organizations or individuals that are, that build housing. But the trick is that we want to translate that into a policy so that the town can objectively, and I said effectively, efficiently engage in, builders, developers that will build the housing that meets our needs, and it's not just on a sort of gut basis or long-term relationships. It's like how do we measure these projects as they come towards the town? So we've identified a number of criteria that should be evaluated and translated that, as I said, into the policy that's attached to the report. And I just want to draw your attention to a few things in the framework, how projects are identified and evaluated, and then the criteria. So in the framework, apart from just saying that these are the objectives, or rather, these are the principles that are to be applied, it's acknowledged that I want to quote from the report. Sorry, I've highlighted this, and then my kitchen table, the yellow light on my eyes. How old am I? I don't know. Whatever. I can't see it. So. But the idea is that we want to use the RFP process. It's a process that the town uses on many, many projects that we do every year, almost every month. There's an RFP posted, and the town's asking for submissions either from, competent individuals or for tenders, for example. They're sort of the same process. But this is a good, measurable, competitive way to ensure the town's, business planning objectives are met. And that sort of is identified in the framework, and I've outlined the principles in that way. And then turning the page to the implementation, I highlight that the policy also identifies is that in order to get on the list, council at their discretion has to identify the properties. This is not just sort of any property the town owns. Council has to identify these are properties that are worthy of providing affordable housing to the community, and they should be developed through the provisions of this policy. So that's number one. Number two is that I guess that there's other ways the town could do this. And council at the time identifying can choose, instead of the RFP, they can engage in affordable housing in other ways, as long as the principles are achieved. That's what's outlined in the policies. And then I guess the third item of that section is just to highlight that council can, because I mean, I've said this before, I'm not an absolutist. There's, more than 5,000 pieces of land in the town, maybe 6,000. They all identify unique elements. They're not all the same dimensions. They're not in the same location. Some are on the water, some are on the highways, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so therefore, council can identify special parameters that those properties should be able to, achieve. If they're small properties, maybe it's, different than large properties. If there are areas of town that need parks, maybe council identifies, in the development of these lands as affordable housing, you also have to accommodate parks. Blue Water Lands was identified last month that way. So I want to highlight that. And then the scoring charts here are deliberate. And so apart from it being deliberate, I guess the idea is that if the priority is to provide affordable housing, we have to try to maximize the affordable housing that's provided. So it's nice that there are lots. I mean, I get these calls a lot. It's nice that there are providers, and I've had this from a few years ago, that want to build housing, but it has been in quantities that aren't very aggressive, that they are, they're really, I don't know what they are. I don't want to put words in their mouths, but I don't think they achieve the objectives that the town sets out in this official plan or strategic plan, or just generally the Attainable Housing Task Force. Is that when we identify municipal land for use as affordable housing, it's certainly a very good opportunity for the town to explore, but they have to be done in our terms. And so if affordable housing is to provide it, it's got to be done optimizing, as the principles are outlined, optimizing its use as affordable housing, working with the right builders, could be with affordable housing providers, could be with not-for-profit organizations. I don't know. I don't want to, that's why the policy is not identified any individual organization. It's sort of exploratory that way. And I guess the final element of the report is the delegation. I'd be remiss to, I guess, just explain that based on the discussion over the last little while, is that when we're delegating to the CAO, this isn't really a delegation to an individual. This is really council's way of expressing that the administration, as it's been set up and appointed, is the best tool to implement that. The administration can, in its good judgment, inform council of how they go about the decisions making, and will inform them, as you can see with previous decisions on other delegated matters, such as site plans. We report to council regularly on those, but we also may have to come back. We may need council's advice on a number of matters. And I guess what else was I wanted to say on the delegation? Oh, that's right, is that council, it's not like it's a one and done. You're expressing your priorities through this policy, but there are other tools that are just legislated requirements or otherwise of the town. So for example, the zoning, many of these properties are not zoned for housing. And so council will have a direct decision to make on properties that are identified through this process or through site plan. I gave in the report as an example of site plan. There's still comment directly on those decisions before a decision is made on site plans. And there could be others. It could be a lease agreement if that's the path council chooses. It could be on any sale agreement. We aren't delegating that. We're recommending delegation of that. It's really this process. So I leave the report there. I'm really encouraged by the comments that have come in over the last few days, but I'm also excited and willing, Mr. Mayor, for any comments and discussion that's arise tonight. So.
Okay, very good. So there is a recommendation that council approve the affordable housing on town-owned lands policy. Is there a mover and seconder for that? And we'll have a discussion. Moved by Davinsky, seconded by Duhame. And questions or comments from members? The Vice Deputy Mayor, and then Helpin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start things off. I'll need a few minutes here. I did send in some comments today to Jay and Karen. I just there were a lot of comments. First of all, I wanted to say, Jay, I think this is a great start, and having a housing policy like this with a matrix, I think is something that it's going to pay dividends, and it's going to lead to some really good things for affordable, attainable housing. So I think your initial work is really good. I just I do have a few concerns about if we've gone far enough, and I did send sample copy out from Leamington. I know you've looked at it, Jay, and I know that you've gleaned some information from there, and I just wondering if we should be gleaming a little bit further. I wanted to go through a few items that I was hoping that could be included in potentially the next draft. If council decides to adopt tonight, then I guess we'll adopt it. But I'm thinking that there needs to be a few things clarified, and I'm just going to start with the delegation of authority. And I know that with the bylaw, care is hired, and there's certain delegation of authority rights that our CAO can and should be doing with developments to help speed up the planning process. I just, when I read in there that the CAO will, has the delegated authority to decide on which RFP proposal is accepted, that concerned me a little bit. I'm hoping, and I'm surely it would be that Mark Polly, our director, and Jay would be looking at those RFPs, and it'd be a consultative approach where staff would make that decision and make that recommendation, not just the CAO. I'm just hoping that the recommendation would come back to council, and I guess that's my first point with an RFP. In this report policy and matrix, I'm hoping that the next document we see, hopefully it comes back in an amended document format where the RFP will definitely come back to council first. And could a staff member answer that question? First of all, Mr. Mayor, would the RFP come back to us to take a look at before we, take 8 acres of land, municipal trust, and turn it over to a land developer, which I think, we need more than that, as far as I'm concerned.
So maybe we can put that to Manager of Development Services, and potentially the CAO may have a comment.
Madam CAO, would you prefer I provide a preliminary answer and then you go, okay, thank you. I guess the first item is to highlight what's in the report already, is that their council has numerous roles in land use planning, as you already know. Let's use the Blue Water property by the Y daycare as an example. Right now it's zoned PD. I think it is. At least it's in even the official plan. It might be residential, but it's zoned PD. So right there's number one. And council can't delegate this, is the rezoning. Council has a direct say over the form, density, shape of the development, not just from the zoning, but through the site plan process. So council has a direct say over that. Number two is, I guess, based on just the sort of normal experience of an RFP process, is that although I guess from my perspective, I'll defer to CAO on the rest of it, is that it is a consultative process is the norm, is that proposals are, or at least rather RFPs are posted, submissions are made, evaluated, and on a regular basis, reports are provided to council if needed. So if it's within budget, it's fine. If it meets the terms of the town, it's clear it meets the policy of the town. But without putting words in the CAO's mouth, and maybe I'll let her explain, is how does she seek council input on those cases that require further input? So, and I don't see that as any different here.
CAO?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jake did a great job answering the question, and I think I would just add, Vice Deputy Mayor, to your first question around delegation. I definitely don't make any kind of decisions or on my own. That I think I mentioned to you this afternoon that the choice of the language around that comes from legislation. It comes from what we see happening in the site plan approval process, as an example. That at the end of the day, there needs to be a signature on an agreement with the parties. And so it is just clarifying whose signature is going to be on that agreement. And I do believe it says CAO or delegate. However, as Jay highlighted, there is a very consultative process with council that leads us to that place where we have a final agreement. I used the example of a recent one we had in front of us at the corner of Johnson and Waterloo Streets. Very similar, required council to consider a rezoning. So you saw the form and the design of development. You saw the site plan come forward, and you had further comments and questions and directions that you gave staff on that. At the end of the day, though, I did sign the agreement with those parties and handled the fine details. So I think I used the example of last week when we signed off, we were still negotiating on whether or not there was a barrier curb or not at the southern boundary. So those are the details that the administration and staff are involved in. But I do use that as an example to highlight that council is involved with the decision making along the process. And as Jay highlighted, if we ever run into a place where we feel like it's not aligned with the council direction that you've given us, or the negotiations with the parties have taken us down a different path, we will absolutely be back to council to talk about those situations.
Thank you. So to you, Mr. Mayor. So Kara, the RFP process then, and I'm going to use the 8-acre parcel of land as an example, the Blue Water land, which is a significant parcel of land. What you're saying is there will be interim reports come back every step of the way when the RFP process is left for that. We'll see, the decision won't be just left with staff to make that decision on that 8-acre parcel, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing, I mean, getting into the matrix here a little bit, Jay, but as you, Mr. Mayor, again, but the matrix, I'm just wondering when we take a look at property, for example, in behind the independent grocery store, I call it the 3 Sheets Brewery property, that 1 acre in behind the daycare center, versus the 8-acre parcel of Blue Water. The parcel land behind the daycare is a little more simplistic to me. That maybe involve 1 or 2 forms of housing, maybe 3, but the 8 acres, it could be a broad, wide variety of mixed housing. And I just wonder if the matrix needs to be shifted each time that we bring in a new parcel of land, where it shouldn't necessarily be the same matrix each time. Could you comment on that? And do you think that's got potential? Like, do you think that's a valid point I'm making in terms of that the matrix should look a little different? 1 acre versus 8 acres?
Sorry, Mayor, I think I can. I'm just excited to answer. Is that I think it does. I mean, in creating this policy, I've heard for many years there's a need to be flexible in how the town's goals, objectives, strategic priorities are achieved. Mayor, I think I've heard you say is that we can't be tied into, I don't know, I'm putting words in your mouth, but we can't be tied. Maintaining that flexibility is important to the town. And so I think that's expressed in the policy as well, so that when at the appropriate time in the process, the property is brought forward, say the land behind 3 Sheets, council can say, because it hasn't been identified, council said, let's explore it. But when we bring this back to sort of a formal decision, council can say, in addition to these priorities or these criteria in the matrix, we want to see this other thing. I don't know what the issue is. It maybe it has to do with servicing. We want to see how the servicing is evaluated, whether that's in as much detail as council can articulate, or whether it's just highlighting for administration to apply in an RFP. Council can do that at that time. So I think that's in the policy under section B, implementation and review, B1B. Apologize for the naming convention here. I maybe didn't follow the criteria set out by clerks. So
thank you for that. And the matrix, in my view, needs to offer, I mentioned this earlier today when I chat with you, Jay, about the higher points for developers offering affordable housing units. For example, if we have a developer with lands that are saying to the town of Saugeen Shores, look, I'm going to bring in some maybe stacked housing, row housing, maybe bring in some habitat homes, but I'm also going to throw in, a couple of homes that could be deemed, quote, affordable, where the Bruce County could administer those units for $700 or $900 a month versus what is right now $2,000 a month or more for apartments. So I'm just wondering if the matrix should have been given more value to a developer that comes in and says, you know what, I've got this property here and I want to bring in affordable attainable housing but I'm gonna offer up a couple of units to the town of Saugeen Shores, 2 or 3 units for for affordable housing, and the county could maybe administer them. That's the county can and will do that. And perhaps we're going to build some Habitat for Humanity homes in partner with Habitat for Humanity. Should the scoring not be weighted a lot greater for that type of developer who's going to offer up a lot more than just bringing in some attainable housing, say at $300,000 or $400,000 each, that they're going to offer some habitat and some, affordable housing units that they're donating, contributing to the town, so to speak. So should that not be more heavily weighted?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll go from there. I don't waiting is sort of the tough part, and I appreciate the comment about, well, there's certainly complications with any proponent. Well, I mean I don't want to sound dismissive when I say, well, that'll be filtered out in the process, but it really is meant to be captured through a few of these parameters, and I'll highlight them based on what I heard as your sort of scenario of providing a few units for affordable housing, say a few units for habitat. So I guess I consider them under the percent of housing units which meet affordability parameters. If they're really going to be habitat for sale, or for, in the case of the ones go for the county housing, maybe some go for rent. In the case of a habitat, they go for sale. Well, they're still meeting the parameters for housing, and maybe they're in a sufficient quantity that they score highly for that. And then that going to the next criteria is that they're the type of, are they really for moderate income, or are we talking low income? I'm not sure. I mean, I think the price point for moderate affordable housing for meet the county criteria is $399,000. I think that's sort of, I don't think that's low income affordability. I think that's moderate income. But anyways, they score points for that. If they're county housing for beyond economic needs, I know the county provides housing for other needs, equity groups, identifiable minorities, etc. They could qualify under special needs housing. And then I guess it's on competency. If they can secure these sort of housing units through habitat or other partnerships, let's say, they could score highly on sort of the competency or ability to deliver housing, as sort of on the, you have a really competent builder, but they really need a partnership to get the housing at affordable. They're going to score highly on the competency and the timelines. Having said that, I'll just repeat what I said in the last question. There are opportunities for council to identify special parameters. And if that means, especially where I understand, based on past, I can't remember how many years ago, Habitat's built houses in the town. If Habitat approaches the town, there's an opportunity for council to identify, work with Habitat and, secure housing. And when we can make sure this is a community project and not just, as a single, tunnel vision type project. And that's how the policy is designed. It's meant not to focus on tunnel vision. It's meant to be as broad a, process as possible. Mr. Mayor, I'll defer to you.
No, sorry. I just wanted, the CAO has a comment. I wanted to make sure he directed.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on Jay's answer and maybe directly answer the Vice Deputy Mayor's question. I think with the parts that Jay highlighted in the matrix add up to somewhere around 75% of the scoring. So as Jay described it, there's the potential that affordability piece is addressing up to 75% of the scoring. So I just was wanting to highlight that number as a response to the question around the weighting.
I just want to, there's a clause in here about the percentage of housing units which meets affordability parameters, and it's a section of the matrix. The maximum score of 50 points would be assigned to a builder who proposed to construct and lease all of their units at an affordable rate. And like I've spoken with many developers over the last 2-3 years, and I'm not sure that. Matter of fact, I'd recommend that be lowered from like all of the units. I just don't think you can accomplish that. And I'm just wondering. And again, I'm looking at the Leamington's example, but I think they're using 30% of a build to be deemed leased as affordable. So I just don't know whether we're asking too much of developers to deem all of their units affordable. I don't think it's going to happen. So I just don't think it's practical. That's all. I just wanted you to comment on that.
Jay?
Well, yes, I mean, I appreciate it. It wasn't a question, but I do want to say it is an accumulation score. Proponents submit proposals and competitively are taking a risk. I admit that we're trying to minimize risk because there is a fine balance between encouraging developers, partnerships with affordable housing providers to submit proposals to access town land while not, the balance of going too far and having too prescriptive a requirement, which is why it's just part of an overall. It's one of 9 criteria. Yes, it's the most important, but I think from my read of the task force and the strategic objectives is affordability is highly important to the town. If they score low, but that's fine. That's only one element. They could score high on a lot of the other things. And so that's my answer.
Jay, I just with the matrix again. And my comment was one of the comments I have is it seems to favor development of rental units. And I mean, there's a need for that missing middle too. That $350,000-$400,000 home. I mean, the average price today for a new home is $700,000 or $800,000, and I just don't see the same amount of weight being put on those attainable units. That are the $400,000 range, for example. We seem to be favoring rental units, and I don't think this is what this is all about. Is it? Is that we're just trying to focus on rental only?
Well,
Jay, you comment?
yeah, I guess I appreciate it. It is a pickle. I mean, having the town, is who, I'm going to step back. Municipal government in Ontario is not in a good position to dictate market sort of requirements. We do have a good tool here. I'm not an economist, but my perception and observation is that getting an affordable home ownership is difficult, which is why I think there is a role for Habitat to play. I don't want to minimize the issues, why I'm prefacing my answer this way. But I don't think the policy precludes that. I did receive a comment over the last couple of days, which sort of said that we are delimiting that. I think that's not correct. I think, again, in this evaluating sort of home ownership, let's say home ownership is not able to commit housing affordability over a very long time. But again, it's just one of 9 criteria that could be evaluated. They might score low. In the case of Habitat, I think in the comment their mortgages are 20 years. Will they still score points? But they can score really highly on a lot of other things like their competency. They've got a long history building homes in this area. They've got a long history of delivering them in relatively quick times. They've got a long history of, just working with towns throughout to minimize town costs and provide as much units as can be built in a reasonable period with, depending on the community, mobilization, let's say, for that. I'll defer to you. I think there's a couple of you that are on the board of Habitat and know that a lot better than me, but I'd say just use that as an example that they're still really well positioned to meet terms of this policy. I don't want to close off opportunities to do better than Habitat. Let's put it that way.
And we've read Mr. Habits from the Housing for All Committee wrote an excellent letter to all of council today. And, I agreed. The comment was made to me today. It's just not about Habitat for Humanity. I get that. But I think that Habitat could be a very, very strong partner with a private developer in the town, a 3P partnership. And so I think that, the partnership component of it, I really believe it needs to be a little stronger worded with the matrix and in the policy to really place more focus on partnerships, and it should be more heavily weighted for a developer, for example, that's going to partner with Habitat for Humanity and they're going to build 30-40 homes and say, hey, Habitat, here's 5 homes we're going to build for you. That should be heavily weighted, and hopefully there's a developer out there that will do that. So I just want to leave that with staff again, that one. Are there bonus points for a developer that provides affordable, attainable housing at no cost to the town of Saugeen Shores?
So just before we carry on, Mike, we do have quite a few people in behind you who want to say something. So
I'll leave it there.
I'll leave it there
and leave it open to everybody else, and I'll come
We'll
back.
get an answer to that one and then we'll go on. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's an element in here. There's no cost to the town. So if someone's willing to build, I'll use your example, 30 to 40 houses and provide affordable units at no cost to the town, and they're willing to enter into an agreement to provide that over the long term, great. They score highly on that one.
Okay. Okay, so I have, so I've taken them in order that I saw them come up, so I'll go Halpin, Davinsky, Huber, Gray, Stack, and I'll start with Halpin then.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I'll try to be as short and sweet as possible. First of all, Jay and the staff, this report is a very good start. I'm really excited and pumped to get going on affordable housing. I do believe this is going to be the council that is going to break through with affordable housing and start with some concrete poured for it. What some of my concerns are, and I won't go over the ones that Mike mentioned, we need a chance to receive this for information so that we have a chance for public to look at it. People will be following this meeting and we need to hear back from stakeholders such as United Housing for All, Habitat for Humanity, etc. So that's one of the things that I want to do is receive this for information and get a chance for more public feedback on it. It's always good to have public feedback, and I think it's always wrong to get ahead of the public on stuff like this. I'm glad that we have room for private-public partnerships, such as Habitat for Humanity, who is our Habitat is the oldest charter in Ontario. More directly to the rubric, pre-consultation should be part of any request for proposal so that people have a chance to sit down with staff, and just the way we're going to use a pre-consultation with the community public permitting system. The matrix should be a guide for us and not a dictate. I'm glad I've heard Jay kind of do that. I'll give you a bad example of working with the school board. When Saugeen District Secondary School needed renovating or they were deciding what to do, one of the things to do was tear it down and build a school for 550 people, because that's how many people were in it at the time. And we said to them, your own figures show us that the school is going to hit 1,200 in about 10 years. And they said, well, this is what the matrix says. So that's what we'll have to do. I hope that we can avoid such ridiculous things as that. I'm also glad to hear that different pieces of property might be suitable for different proposals. And finally, I believe that council needs a lot of involvement in this, and I would even say council needs final approval for the use of public land. You know, you talk to any farmers, they're not making any land anymore. And when we part with our land, we're there to council, we're elected for oversight. We have responsibility. And I think that if we're giving up public land, I think council has to firmly have their signature on it so that we're accountable for it. Those are I think this is a great proposal. I'm excited for it. And I'm looking forward to it maturing and strengthening into just the perfect policy. Thank you.
Any comments from you on any of that, Jay? Or
Yeah, I guess I'll comment on the pre-consultation part because it was unique in my mind. The rest is certainly I appreciate the input and comments, though I don't have a response. I think my report and provisions speak for themselves. On the pre-con, that is also a normal part of the RFP process. We post, we as the town state our intentions about what we want, and then interested parties can engage staff and or through the process opportunities to explore, okay, what do you mean by this? Do we understand? Are we on the same page? You know, and I think in my report for the last time is that it goes beyond that with the zoning, is that in the example, the blue water, is that the proponent's going to engage at the early stage about what their preliminary design is, but they have to propose their consultation approach. And that is certainly, there's a statutory element, but they have to explain how they fit in with the community, and they're going to be engaging the community through that process very directly. It's a requirement. It's not like they can walk away and nobody can delegate that. It is there for the final say for council. What the housing is going to look like, how dense it is, how far from the streets. what sort of amenities need to go there, sidewalks, etc. That's the town's final say. So I think accountability that and it's sort of early pre-consultations very much an element in this. And I apologize if that's not as forefront as it needs to be. It's part of the other processes already articulated in either the Planning Act or Municipal Act.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Vince. Oh, you have a follow-up, Councilor Helpman, quickly?
Just briefly, and then any comment about Jay or the CAO about council having final approval of the use of these lands? And
I'll turn it over to you first, Jay, and if the CAO has a comment, she's welcome to.
Yeah, well, there's many opportunities. Depends on the property. I mean, there might, I don't know all the properties the town owns. I don't even know if they're all zoned for what the zone is or for what the use should be. But there are, even if there are properties zoned for use, there's still council say on what can be done. There's the declaration of surplus land. That's council's decision. It can't be delegated. That can be, whether you're declaring a surplus to sell it, like you did, a couple months back with the property on Sandy Acres, or it could be down the line if you enter into an arrangement where you have a long-term agreement with an operator. You declare surplus at the appropriate stage because then it's not the town for 50 years. Say it's not going to be operated for the town's needs within 50 years. That's council's say. It can't be delegated. But as I mentioned, the zoning is another stage at which council has final say. It doesn't get zoned, it doesn't get built. You can't issue a permit, and there's a very clear. These are things the developer likes. One thing I didn't stress, and I didn't want to be too direct about it. I should have been, Mayor, is that the risks associated with having processes that involve 4 or 5 stages sort of removed from where they can get a building permit are risky for builders and developers. They don't propose stuff generally. And so the community planning permit system you heard, I think a year ago, is that, that is a process, a permitting system that helps builders understand that they can build because they know up front if they apply for it, it'll get approved or it won't. Like they know up front. Whereas if they have to rezone, they don't know that. So I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but you're doing the heavy planning and articulating your requirements up front, just like you would in the permit system, by saying these are the things that are important to the town. It's important to have as many housing units that are affordable. It's important to have design considerations right up front in proposals. It's important to have it for long term, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what's expressed in this policy.
Okay, Councilor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and following up on Councillor Halpin, I agree that we have to keep an eye on our land. Yeah, after all, it is public land, and we just don't want to give it away willy-nilly. And I know we're talking here about 2 pieces specifically, the one by the Y Care Center, and also the one near Three Sheets Brewery. Now, will we continue to own the land after it's developed? Since we own this land now, walk me through the process. Do we sell it to these people at fair market value, or what happens?
It's a good one. That depends on the proposal and how to achieve the objectives and principles outlined in the policy. But that determination is still council's, whether you want to sell it, at a depending on the proposal, whether you want to sell it at a below market value, or whether you want to retain ownership over the long term, like you have with other projects. But Kara or the mayor, if you've had past experience with that, I don't want to gloss over that because I don't have a lot of experience with that part.
Any comments, the CAO?
Yeah, I think I could just add on what Jay is saying, that, I can appreciate that council is maybe saying there's other pieces that we want to see more clarity around. And I think what this policy is doing is it's touching on a number of other policies and frameworks, whether or not that's provincial legislation, like Jay's talked about with a zoning bylaw, or it's the surplus land policy, related to council making the decision around the land. So Councillor Davinsky, to answer the question, it is ultimately up to council whether or not you want to declare the land surplus and sell it, and you'll make that individual decision on each proposal. And so there is a number of, like we've talked about, different processes and policies that are going to apply in any proposal that moves forward, and council will be in lockstep making those decisions along the way.
Thank you both. And Mr. Mayor, my other questions were answered, so I will give up the floor.
Okay, thank you. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also will just echo a couple of other people who said it's a good start. I would not be in favor of us adopting this evening because it is a good start, and I think it has a number of items that require a little more clarification, and also just perhaps there's some more details that might fit in that would just alleviate some concerns that I and some other councillors have expressed. I do appreciate that the intent is to realize some long-term social impact, but we don't really, have a defined goal or idea there. So, at the very least, I know we want to have more affordable housing, but it's pretty vague, this long-term social impact. I also am going to pick up on the delegation of authority item, and also I have some questions or concerns concerning the consultative process. But to start, like Councillor Halpin said, I'm of the opinion that although the document refers to them always as town-owned lands, they are public lands, and we were elected to represent the public's interest. And so I feel that we need to be pretty careful about how we look at this and how we delegate authority. And I appreciate the explanation that it is a group process. It's not really just one person, but the document says delegating to a person. And so I think that delegation question requires a little more thought, because I've heard, where council will be involved, and then it was, there may be a need to come back to council for advice. There's also somewhere in there about agreements for purchase and sale will be considered by council. Doesn't say that they would need to be approved by council. It says considered by council. So language matters to me, and I think it matters to all of us. And the fact that these are public lands, I think, it's a good start, but we need a little more attention to detail in it. Also, I just heard a reference to the possibility for decisions to be made that the land is not necessarily sold, the declaring surplus. But my read initially of this, I'm confused now because there's parts where it appears as though this RFP process is triggered once council declares land surplus, and it has the potential to be sold to a developer. So I would like to see a little more language in there that picks up on some of these other things that a few other members have mentioned about partnerships and perhaps leasing of land over a period of time, but the town retains ownership, because it wasn't clear to me that all of those balls could potentially trigger the RFP process. So that's just a comment. I also wonder there's reference to this RFP process, but what about if somebody just comes in with an unsolicited proposal? Would that then, if somebody just sees a piece of land and thinks, oh, I could do something there, what comes first? So I guess, I'm not clear on how that would play out. I'll just finish my comments, and then I don't necessarily have questions. They're more just comments, because I really do hope that the item gets deferred, that we don't adopt, because I think there's enough here that there needs to be a little more discussion, which I hope will come at another meeting. But I would like to have some information defined in this as to what is the consultative process. It's mentioned a couple of times in the document, and it talks about relevant community service groups and organizations potentially be involved. It talks about neighbors, but I'm really not clear on what that might look like. So, and it says at the right time in the process. Well, I think we perhaps it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the policy, but I, as a member of council, would like to know what that looks like, because I think there will be a lot of people interested in this, and I'm certainly not a one who thinks that if a couple of people in a neighborhood don't like something, that's gonna shoot it down. But I think that we're the kind of community that we say we care about what community members think. So this document does pick up on a number of places, or does include in a number of places, the language that says consultative processes are part of it. I just don't know what they look like. I'd like to know that. I also have some questions concerning just, again, how this delegated authority would work. I would not be in favor of delegating just off the top to the CAO or designate. I do think council plays a bigger role in this, and I would just remind us all that we have been, during this term of council, we have changed the format of meetings so that now we have 3 council meetings per month. We will be, over the next little while, I think, kind of revisiting or revising the whole committee of whole and regular council thing. And the whole intent behind that, as far as I was led to believe, and I think we all heard, was to give us a more nimble kind of attitude towards council decisions. So, this sense that, maybe our involvement would potentially, create another layer. We put some things in place that were intended to make us able to respond quicker to things that come up. I think we should give that a chance. So, delegating authority all the time doesn't have to happen, because we have put in place 3 council meetings per month, which should give us that kind of ability to react and respond within a very short period of time. And at any time during the process, if we are making some decisions at that point for a particular project or proposal, we could decide to delegate then. But to give this carte blanche delegation, I just don't agree with that. I would like to ask, though, what is the median income for households here in Bruce County? Does anyone have an answer for that? Because this idea of low income or moderate income, I think the word moderate income is a fairly new sort of representation of an opportunity for affordable housing that's coming up more and more. But what is the median income for our community at the moment, so that some of us might have a little better understanding of the 30% of that that would hit the low income mark, I guess, or this 60th percentile, which relates to the moderate income. Does someone have an answer for that?
It looks like both the CAO and Jay may have some comments on a few of your things you've raised there, Deputy Mayor, so I'll turn it over to them to respond as they will.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I would just ask, because that was a lot of questions in one statement, and so that we can respond effectively, if we could get the questions kind of asked and a chance for us to respond, that would just help us sort of manage the conversation tonight. But and I'll let Jay deal with the medium income piece. I think the pieces that were raised around long-term social impact, the consultative process, and when and where the surplus land is triggered is really what the RFP process is about. So we put this out as a request for proposal, and then we see what comes back. And depending what comes back, then we respond to it. So if the proposal comes back and it's asking council to sell lands, then council needs to have that conversation through our surplus land policy. So it's very hard in this policy to anticipate all of those potential outcomes. And I think that we can't do that. But I think that's maybe why council's feeling like maybe it's a bit vague in different areas. But that's because we need to be able to respond to the proposals that come to us. And so I think that piece is really good for us to consider. I did like the comment around unsolicited proposals, and we could include language around that as well. I do think that this is a policy for any town lands, so affordable housing on town-owned lands. So it doesn't have to be through an RFP process. We could receive something solicited in this, unsolicited, and that could apply, but we could look at including language for that. And just on the delegation piece, I really appreciate what council's saying, and I acknowledge, like, my intent is not to, I'm not trying to take the process or anything like that. I do want to highlight, though, it does take probably around anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to get a report on a council agenda in front of council. So that example that I gave with the Johnson Ave and Waterloo Street and the change to the barrier curb in that agreement would have been a month coming back to council, anywhere from 2 weeks to a month coming back to council, depending on where we are in the timelines. And I think that what Jay was highlighting was, in order to attract quality proposals from the development community on this, one of the things we want to create for them is certainty around process. And so, as we've highlighted, there are places where council will be involved at the surplus land decision, at the zoning decision, in and around site plan. But when it comes to the minutiae and the details, that's where Jay, Mark, and the team will be working out those details with the developers, and where, again, those little things that need to be tweaked, we potentially tack on anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks in order to get them back in front of council. And I think that's the part that we're talking about delegating to staff, not any of the other higher level framework decisions or decisions on form. Jay went through all of the different ones: design, form, sidewalks, all those pieces. Those will be decided by council.
And Jay, did you have an answer to the deputy mayor's question about income levels in our community?
Yes, I was just doing the quick, because I had the number. It's about 50,000 is the median income for a person. And I haven't got the household number, but that's what we'll be working on. And it changes year to year, and StatsCan provides updates regularly through, annually, I think, on that value. So.
And Deputy Mayor?
Okay, I thought median income would have been higher here, given the range that we have. So I'll rethink my thought process on
Well,
that.
average is higher because there's a sort of the weighted at the top end of income, but there are a lot of people that don't make that, and that for median is just like half the people make less and half the people make more than that.
Okay. I hadn't really intended this to be a question because I was just raising concerns, but I would appreciate now, since there's been some responses, what would consultative processes look like, and what would be an example of a relevant community service group or organization that would fit into something here? What does that look like? Because it's mentioned a couple of times and it's a good idea. So I'd just like to know how that might work.
Sure, Jay.
Yeah, so there's two different ways of providing or at least holding consultation. I mean, certainly excluding statutory, that's separate. So consultation with the neighborhood community would be based on proponents' sort of ability to communicate, and we want to see what they propose. Do they have a community meeting? Are they sending letters? Are they, doing online surveys? How are they getting the input of those that live in the area? And then the target community, sort of the occupants of projects, could be, say, community living. If they aren't a direct part of the proponent, if they're not a partner, in other words, how are they soliciting input of people with community living to say what are their needs, what type sort of facilities and supportive and assistive services do they need in the housing, or if it's county housing, again, if they're not direct partners, how are they including that in the design? I can't take the builder's word for it as much as I believe them. We certainly need to have that support from targeted community groups. That's what I mean by that.
Okay. So, the Deputy Mayor, do you have more comments, or are you done?
Well, I just, what I heard you say was the proponent goes after the input. There would be a place up front, though, ahead of some other stuff for the town to get some feedback or to look for some engagement, right? So
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Well-
not just on the onus of the developer, right?
Well, the proponent will tell us what they're proposing and the town will accept it. And if they're proposing something that's suitable, like in other words, it's including the town or it's outside the zoning process, it's not just the bare minimum, that'll be taken into consideration.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues who have preceded me because, and to Jay and Kara for your answers. It's been instructive to me, and I think the first point that I'd like to say is that it's clear to me from this discussion that I think it would be useful for us to go back into the policy and provide more detail. So it would be useful for council, be useful for the public, would be useful for potential partners and developers. So for instance, just some clarification about what is involved in the disposition of this land. Is it going to be leased? What are the possibilities? Leasing, sale, outlining those possibilities as options. Describing or delineating the responsibilities that you see between the staff and the CAO, council members, or council. I think once again, all of that is good for us to know. It's good for the public to know. It's good for developers to know. I know this may be kind of tricky when we get into the matrix, but I would like to see some kind of reward for more intangible social benefits. For instance, with Habitat for Humanity, one of the attractive things about that is the sweat equity that's required by the buyers. And I think that and also the potential for them to own a home, future home ownership, all of that is really a benefit to our community. And I think it would be nice to see something like that. Or we hear a lot about cooperatives, especially for seniors. And if there's a proposal that comes forward that offers something like that, it doesn't have to be something that would, tip the scales necessarily, but I think it should be acknowledged in the matrix that there may be more intangible social benefits than just the housing itself, which of course is really important. So that's a thought that I had. I also asked Jay earlier about this is just a language thing, but the term depth of affordability. I guess I'd ask if, just for the benefit of members of the public who read your report, who may be wondering like me, what does that mean? If you could just explain, it's an old-fashioned term we don't use anymore, something like that, just to give for the benefit of the public who looked at that report. Thank you.
Yeah, two things. It's all do with the depth of affordability. It was something we considered, or I considered as a criterion, and we just really struggled to see how it could be measured. Depth of affordability sort of was a measure of the degree to which they exceeded the low income threshold, for example. So, or the moderate income. If they were, moderate income between 50% and 80 percentile of the population, if they were a degree below that, that was deeper affordability. So these are really, if you think of it in terms of rent for, say, the rent subsidy, if we're subsidizing $490 a month for households, we could deepen the affordability by providing, say, $600 a month. That makes it that much more affordable. So that's depth of affordability. So that's what that meant. We took it out because it was really hard to measure on a regular basis, depending on the type of unit, the scale, intensity. So it was like we abandoned it because it wasn't measurable, which leads to the I guess the second part about intangibles, if I just comment on that briefly, Mayor, is that reason why we can't put intangibles here is we can't measure them. As much as you might get a lot of perceived community value from sweat equity, I don't know. How do we measure that? I couldn't do it, so I removed it. And then finally is about the seniors housing. Well, that's what special needs housing. And here's something I can work on. I can just, because I said this is the definition in the provincial policy statement, that's what that's referring to exactly. It's beyond economic need, so it could be accessible. Mobility, housing that meets mobility, psychological or long-term care. They provide assistance for people living. That's still housing, but it's referred to currently as special needs housing. In the future, I note in the policy, it's going to be called additional needs housing. Just words, but that's what it's referring to.
Councilor Grace?
Thanks, Jay. Those are great answers. I just, I think sweat equity could be measured. I mean, isn't it something that's in the model of Habitat for Humanity? It's there or not. Doesn't mean it's, has to be an exaggerated importance, but just to say if that's in the model, then yeah, I mean, they are the ones who decide whether they're going to grant that person. Don't they require a certain number of hours for families to put into to contribute to their project? Maybe it's outmoded, but maybe I'm behind the times and it's changed, but that was my understanding. So to me, that's measurable. And if there's another developer that comes forward with some kind of or organization that has a similar feature, then we tick it off and say, yeah, that's there. You get 2 points or 5 points or whatever.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, no comment. I mean, councillors made a point, and I guess I disagree. It's hard to measure when we're talking about its use value for municipal land.
Okay. Good enough, Councilor Stack.
Hi. So I just have a couple more just comments, and I think there's a football game in the background. So if you can hear it, I apologize. I assure you I'm not watching it. As I've mentioned before, sports is not my thing. So just a couple of more sort of comments rather than anything else. From my perspective, I'd actually I have a preference, and it's based on a perspective that we should be prioritizing rental units. I think rental units and affordability is much easier to manage on the long term. My concern, if excluding the Habitat model, moving towards attainable, purchasable housing. Unless we're going to follow that with strict guidelines in terms of who can procure that or who can purchase those homes, I'd be concerned, or I am concerned, that you buy them and then, very quickly you can flip them or rent them out. And there's no prescription on affordability. So if it's town lands, my preference would be moving towards rental lands that are consistently in, as permanent as we can make them affordable. The issue, we've just talked about the median income in the town. So if we have more than approximately 50% of our town making under $50,000, I think that suggests to me more housing on a consistent basis that is affordable should be the priority. And with that in mind, when I look at the matrix, my only, I think there's been a bunch of comments, having some experience in drafting RFP evaluations, there's a myriad of critiques and comments you can provide on them. I think what I heard is this, this is not strictly set in stone, or perhaps that could be addressed. My only comment would be, I would love to see, or my only comment is, I'd love to see some prescription on affordability. Again, to my earlier comments, it would be great to say, look, if we're going to sell this land, affordability must be a principle that the buyer prescribes to or is willing to ascribe to, and that we can put into contract some obligation there. Just because, again, if we're going to start selling town lands for these purposes, I think it's important that we be very clear on our expectations and hold ourselves accountable to those. With respect to consultation, my only comment would be, again, I would want to set out some expectations with respect to what's going to be persuasive commentary, because what I don't want to see is we allow public consultation to prevent affordable housing. I think for all the support, there's always a risk that there's going to be people who don't want affordable housing based on a preconceived notion of the consequences of affordable housing in their neighborhood. So I think public consultation is important and I support it, but I would want some principle in the policy, if we could, that states that the purpose of such consultation is to ensure that the whatever needs we're addressing are being met, and the intention is not to find, is not to use perception to govern how we make decisions, particularly when it comes to affordable housing and some of the beliefs that surround people who may live in that housing. So I'm just leery of that. And then my final comment, or sorry, two final comments. I thought I had more than I thought. Sorry. I've heard a lot of feedback on references to other policies, and this may be a large undertaking, but I just wonder, given some of the feedbacks and questions that have come from council, if there's an opportunity to just make some cross references, because I hear both the CAO, the feedback that a lot of this policy is relying on other policies we have, and I sort of agree with that statement. I just wonder if perhaps if there's an opportunity to make some cross references there to provide people with additional commentary. And then my actual final comment is on delegation. Has come up several times in the last, I think, 6 to 8 months. I know there was quite a boisterous discussion on delegation when we were talking about the sale of lands for the clean energy land. So I just wonder if there's an opportunity to do a policy statement for review on delegation, if that may resolve some of these issues, because it does. I mean, this is sort of tangential to the issue at hand, but it does seem to come up quite often. But those are all my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mann. No, but I'll mute myself.
We can't hear.
Dave's just working on unmuting here. I don't think they can hear you, Dave. Do you want to come over here and speak?
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm going to lower my volume. Okay. Yeah, there's been a lot of good discussion. I'm not going to go through repeating all that's been said. When I first read the policy, I was actually quite surprised, and the way I look at it is this policy, it's going to it sets the stage, and it's a good start for inviting proposals from developers, because let's face it, there's a lot of affordable housing that exists in Saugeen Shores already. There's lots of models. There's the county model. There's individuals who have basement apartments, or people that have owned apartment buildings or small duplexes and triplexes that are under rent control that are still affordable. So there's lots of models that are out there, and I think we should explore some of those models and invite those types of models to come forward through the RFP process. But the way I look at this policy is it's simply, it's like an invitation, and it sets out the dress code, and it sets out the meal or the menu for the evening, and then it invites people to come along. But when you get to the party, the developers have to go through all of the different processes, and council controls that. We're the hosts. We're the host community. We're going to be the ones. We still have to set the zoning. We still have to set the parameters. We still have to accept their proposals. We still have to declare land surplus if that's the case. And I think it was Councillor Stack said that this is geared mostly towards rental, and I agree. when you're talking about home ownership, then we have to sell land. There's only two models of ownership. There's you own the land and you own the house, or there's the condominium model where you pay a condominium fee, which usually are quite high. But the Park Bridge or the Faith Maple Estates model, where you don't own the land, you just own the structure, or Saugeen Acres is another one. So I'm not in favor of that model so much, but this is really inviting people to do purpose-built rentals, and I think that's going to be the aim, and that's what I'd like to see, and that's the short-term solution that we need in our community. So people who work here, who don't have $100,000 jobs, can afford to live here. So I like the policy. I think it's a good first start. Is it going to be cast in stone and never be changed? Probably not. But does it get the conversation going, get the information out to developers, and get them thinking about innovation and different ways that they can deliver on land that is currently not available to them? And I think it does. And so for that reason, I'm in favor of this policy as written. Thank you.
Thank you. The CAO has a comment. CAO?
Yeah, just quickly, I just to acknowledge the comment made by the counselor, like that the policy isn't written in stone. And I shout out to Jay and staff that, again, in Saugeen Shores, we're really breaking new ground on this in the province of Ontario. There isn't a lot of examples to pull from. So I do anticipate that along the way, we will be learning some lessons, and by all means, we can be updating and improving as we go.
Okay, Councillor Halpin and the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Just a couple comments is, I think part of our land, we need to, I think it'd be very beneficial for us in our planning to keep a piece of land for more Bruce County affordable housing. I think that's an important thing to do. And as well as that, you can do home ownership on leased land. Like we own a condo. It's like you can have ownership through the leased model. And I like that idea because it keeps us in control of the land for forever. So there is that model out there as well. I'll keep my comments to that.
Okay, thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I won't be supporting the policy as written. I think there's a whole lot of things that need to be clarified and embedded into the policies so that developers, when they're looking at this the first time, will clearly understand the policy. This is an extremely, extremely important policy we're about to approve here, adopt here at some point in time. And I think there's no harm in us taking a good first look at it tonight, which we have. There's been some excellent comments around the council table. And I think there's a lot of room to make some adjustments, some amendments, and bring this back in 1 month's time or our next planning meeting. And so I won't be supporting it. I think there's a lot of things that need to be verified and clarified. I just had a couple more questions, Jay, about the anticipated timeline to the turnkey. I noted in the Leamington policy that they allow for 3 years, and you're saying 18 months. I'm just wondering if the 18 months for the full 10 points, I think it was worth, to receive a maximum of 10 points, the opponent would need to complete the project within 18 months. I don't know. So, that 80-acre parcel of land, for example, at Blue Water, there's a lot of mixed housing could be involved with that project. Could take 2-3 years to develop what we're developing there. Ton of housing, mixed housing. So I'm just wondering, Jay, why the 18 months versus what I've read around the province? Some of them are, the Leamington policy is 3 years. So what's your reasoning for the 18 months?
Okay.
Yeah, my reason is based on discussion with our developers in this area that in the speed at which they can go once, say, a site plan is entered into, they can get a building permit and construction going for within 18 months. So, the apartments buildings that are being constructed right now at south on Waterloo Street. Discussion with that developer is within 2 years, and I think we can be as aggressive as we need to be.
Okay.
And having said that, it's only 10 points out of 100.
No, I
for
understand you,
30,
and I've
so it's a small
really
component.
difficult to hear you, by the way. I don't know whether anybody, it's just me, but
Sorry about
I
that.
can't. Oh, there you go. Now I can hear you now.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, 2 years might be more ideal, especially for the Blue Water land, which is a big development. But I
We
mean,
can
quicker
adjust
the
that.
better. Quicker the better, in my view, too. I mean,
The fuse
let's get it done, but-
development, once they get going, is 18 months. That's 330
Yeah.
units on a bigger parcel.
Right. So the only other comment I wanted to finish with, I'm just wondering if some of these changes, again, to repeat myself a little bit, but need to be embedded into the policy from a clarity perspective. Again, if a developer was not listening to your responses tonight, Jay, I'm not sure some of them, and this is not to downplay their smart people, but we've had the good fortune of listening to all of your responses tonight. And I think some of what you've said tonight needs to be embedded into the policy for clarifications. That's my view on it. And I believe that we should be deferring it to the next planning meeting. And I would hope that some of the changes that, not just I, but other members of council recommended are, placed into the policy for better clarification. So.
All right, well, maybe I might, or do you have a comment, CAO?
I was just going to offer as a bit of feedback, like and again, because we are breaking new ground, I don't know that we can anticipate all the places where we're going to need to find clarity. And when we start a request for proposal process, for those that have been involved with them, oftentimes a lot of questions come up, and we handle them with information out to the candidates and addendum out to everyone who's bidding on the project. So there are some tools there, and I struggle to know whether or not we can find all the places of clarity that we're going to need to, because we are breaking new ground with this policy.
We'll turn over to the director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to extend that point a little bit and just share an observation that, we've heard some comments, and rightly so, that we want to make sure we have flexibility when we're considering proposals that come forward. And every time we add detail, it makes it more difficult to have that flexibility. So detail and flexibility are often at cross purposes. And so that's one of the struggles we'll have in terms of adding detail. It'll be challenging to maintain the town's flexibility at the same time. So I just want to offer that thought.
Maybe I'll make some comments at this stage. And I just want to thank all members for the comments that you have made. This is, I think, as several of you have pointed out, it's a major decision, right? What to do with town-owned lands. This is the, among a couple of pretty high-profile things, this is one of the most significant trusts that is invested in us, right? The ownership and management of the lands that the public owns, and we should not. Certainly not surrender the public's lands lightly or without a great deal of due diligence. And that's why it's always cumbersome and slow for the town to get rid of land, because the processes are specifically designed to prevent us from doing that quickly. They're specifically designed to hold us up and make it take a long time, so that we have to think it through really carefully. So that reality, of course, runs at cross purposes a bit to what we're trying to do, which is to advance affordable housing as quickly as possible, right? We want to build affordable housing across Saugeen Shores. We needed it 5 years ago. We need it desperately right now. We have to get it done. And so we have to find a way to make our policies meet that bar, right? We have to find a way to make our policies adjust the way we do things, maybe, to meet the pressing need, the crisis that the community is facing. And so our lands are one tool we have to do that with, but we have to perhaps think about how we use our lands in a new way to enable us to advance them to meet the housing crisis today. So that's, I think, what this policy strike attempts to do, right? We've heard this before when we talk about housing development in our community, that part of what prevents developers from proposing higher density developments, from building the kind of housing we need built, is uncertainty, right? They're uncertain about us in the end, right? Uncertain about, they'll go through a whole process on the basis of the official plan, the zoning bylaw, our public statements, whatever they may be. And they'll get to the 11th hour, they get to the very end, they'll come up against a planning committee, and the planning committee will say no, right? And so that perception that developers do have prevents them from proposing things in the first place. So that's why we're working on the CPPS, for example, right? We are saying, okay, let us take the political process. We still have it, but instead of doing it when the whole thing is over at the 11th hour, we do it at hour one. We do it at the very beginning. We have the consultations, we have the discussion as a community. We say, this is what we want for our lands and how we want to plan them. And we have that whole process up front. And then the developer comes in and says, okay, now I understand what the community standards are. I will propose something and it'll work its way through and I'll get a permit at the end because that permit will be issued by staff and on the basis of what the public and council said at the beginning. And this is a very similar process to what's being proposed here now, right? Where we have a policy being brought forward that says council is going to initiate, and you can see that in here. Actually, it's interesting. We were talking about what initiates this, and it's right in the policy. You see scope, and it's item number 4 under scope, and it says, this policy applies to town-owned lands that have been identified by council as being candidates for affordable housing development that have been identified by council. So the policy doesn't even kick in. Nothing even starts until we identify that the land is a candidate for affordable housing. So, you know, the deputy mayor raised the question, what happens if somebody drops something on us, comes forward and says, I want to do this with X parcel of land? That's great, but it's got to come to council and we have to say, yes, it's a candidate for affordable housing before this policy can even start. And when you come back before the policy, we'll have approved the policy. We will have designed it. We'll have laid it out. We will have determined what our standards are, what we want. We've done all that up front so that when the proponent comes in, they can have certainty that that the town will grant approval for something that meets these requirements that council has laid down on lands that council has approved for it to happen on. And that gives certainty. And that certainty will enable or will allow applications to come forward. If we create a process where there's complications, uncertainty, or a political process at the very end, I think that will deter applications in the long term. So I think that I think this is a good policy from that standpoint and a good approach. But we have to remember that if we're going to use public lands, as I said at the beginning, for this purpose, we have to do things like this in order to make our processes, which are cumbersome in the normal state, less cumbersome and less uncertain, because we want to move housing forward quickly on the terms that we want. So, you know, as I guess what I'm saying is I like the policy. I think it sets out some good criteria up front. I think it has a good process that involves council, the community, and an approval based on the input that's received from council and the community. And I think that's the right way to approach this. And ultimately, it achieves our goal, which is to get truly affordable housing, as much of it as possible, built as quickly as possible. And I think that so I'm happy with it and would support it today. I hear what other members are saying, and by all means, if you want to give some direction to do something different, we can consider that. The only thing I would ask is, if you want to defer, give some specific direction to staff about what you want them to do with the policy between now and bringing it back. What exact things do you want to see them add or take away from this thing so that it will meet with your approval? Because I think at the moment, all we have some, I haven't heard, I heard a couple of good things from Councillor Grace about identifying what some of the possibilities for ownership might be that we might offer, and potentially a decision tree for who makes what decision when, that kind of thing that could be added. So I've heard a few points, and I'm sure staff have recorded those, but as I say, if you want to defer, give us some direction as to things you want to see added to the policy. So maybe I'll ask the deputy mayor, and then I see Councillor Halpin.
Councillor Halpin was ahead of me.
I think he had 2 times around. You only had 1, so that's how I made up my mind.
Just to echo, the director said that this clarity thing would make things, I can't remember, you went on a little bit longer. I didn't write down the end part, but what you basically said and what the director said makes sense, except ultimately, if developers want clarity, I think the clarity has to start with us first. So I'm not prepared to support what's before us tonight because it's not clear to me in places, just how it will work and that sort of thing. So in terms of following through, I understand what you're saying about developers want to respond to something that they've got some clarity there. I think the director said basically the same thing, and some clarification of the language in my mind doesn't necessarily mean more complications in it. It provides us with clarity, which then gives us confidence to vote for something, which then will in many ways, I'm sure, change over the next few years as other things come to light. But I think ultimately the clarity and certainty has to start with us. And I'm picking up from a number of members that some of us would like it to have a little time for us to think about it some more, for staff to think about it some more. And because I understand what you're saying, certainty is important. However, certainty has to relate to us too. And so I think, I would not support it the way that it's written right now. Thank you very much.
Understood. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. In listening to these conversations that we have had as council, I'm a little wiser about this policy. Members have brought up good comments and staff has made some good responses. I still believe, though, that I would like to receive this for information and give our stakeholders and the public and people like that to digest it a little bit. Oftentimes after something comes to council, we'll receive floods of emails and people will make their comments and everything like that. And I think it would be wise for us just to receive this for information, give us a chance to sit on it a little bit. And, maybe I'm less concerned now about the role of the CAO in the approval. I think maybe I understand that a little bit better, but why don't we just give this a couple of weeks, get some feedback, hear more from the people involved in housing and partners and everything like that. Is it possible, or is it to say we receive this for information and then bring it back in 3 weeks?
So I have, so I guess this is as good a time as any. I have a resolution. It's been moved and seconded and I'll just revisit it here, that the council approved the affordable housing on town-owned lands policy. Now, members, as you know, you have options. You can defer that if you like. And I suppose I had just to immediately contradict myself. I just asked council members to give us some clear direction on a deferral. But I suppose if you'd like, and if you could defer in sort of the manner that Councillor Halpin suggesting, is just as a period of time to allow the matter to sit out in the public and perhaps to think about it yourselves a little bit longer. What I don't want to do, and I don't think any of you want to do this either, is delay it just for the sake of delaying it, right? I mean, we could bring it back in 2 weeks or whenever, in a month, and vote on. And I just don't want to come back in a month and have this discussion again, right? Where we're not happy with it and then we send it away again. So what I really like is for council to give us, if it's just a matter of waiting because you'd like the public to hear more about it, as Councillor Halpin seems to be Councillor Halpin's view, that's fine, and we would come back and we could decide then. But if, as I kind of get the sense, it's a matter of some members want to see some changes made, I'd really like to know what those changes need to be between now and then to garner council support for approval, because we need to advance this. I think we're unanimous in the view that we need to advance these things. So I would, I don't know, I guess that's sort of the extent of my comments. I don't know what more to add. Maybe I'll get Councillor Grace and then Mayette, and I see the Vice Deputy Mayor. Councillor Grace.
Well, I guess I'd just like to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, which is I think that it would be helpful to add clarification about what are the options for the disposition of these lands. in terms of the possibility of leasing, sale, whatever kind of options there may be. And then a delineation of responsibilities. What are the responsibilities of council? What are the responsibilities of staff? And that would be helpful to me.
Okay, those are good points. Councillor Mayette. Wait a second, let me mute and everything here. Hold on. I got a bunch of feedback.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, when it comes to making suggestions for changes to the policy, I've heard some suggestions made throughout the conversation tonight that I could get my head around and I think are constructive. I've heard other suggestions that may serve to overcomplicate the process and add too much red tape or structure or complicate the process to the point of miring it down. And so I would suggest that that if members have ideas for specific changes to the policy, that we could take maybe a week and have people send those in. And then when we get back to look at the policy again, we could go through them. And I'm not anticipating there's going to be dozens of them, but we go through them one at a time and say, does this make sense? And does all of council, or at least the majority of council, agree that this change should go in? As opposed to just everybody putting things out there right now and Jay trying to scramble them down and find a way to put them into words and try to satisfy everybody's on a whim. We should do it in an organized manner that give people a chance to think it over a bit more. Now that we've had the discussion, people can go through the policy. They can say, if we added a paragraph here, or if we added a matrix here, or we added a flow diagram there, it might help. But just to throw things out there and have them all put in just willy-nilly, I don't think is necessarily constructive. So I like the idea of delaying it if we want to, and then and send those in to Jay and have him put them into a table, and we can look at them one at a time. Over.
Yeah, and I think that may be a good suggestion, Councilman. I think if we, because it is going to be very difficult here, and I think we're a bit bogged down at the moment. If somebody wanted to move a deferral at this time, we could then send it away back to staff. Some good comments have been made here now. Councillor Grace has made a couple of good ones, which I'm sure staff have recorded, and perhaps over the course of the next week or so, if members have other thoughts, they can forward them to staff, and staff can consider them and come back again with another crack at this that will hopefully, well, I think next time we should plan on an up or down vote on the thing. So give your best ideas to staff, have a run through, and we can hopefully put something together at our next meeting that we can pass. So is there anybody who wishes to move a deferral? Is the Vice Deputy Mayor moving a deferral? Yes, and the Deputy Mayor is seconding that motion. There's debate on a deferral. Any questions or comments on the question of the deferral? I don't see. Do you comment on the deferral, the Vice Deputy Mayor?
Can you hear me okay, Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Not so much on the deferral as much as I just wanted to say that I've sent my comments in. So I'm not going to add, I'm not going to send any more comments in. I sent 3 pages of comments in today and sift through them. Council heard them. If council likes some of the things I said, you may want to comment on my comments. I think the scoring system needs to be a little bit different. And but I'm not going to repeat it all. But anyways, yeah, motion to defer.
Yeah, no, and that's the clerk just reminds me, and it's important to remind all members to only share your comments on this with staff. Send them directly to the manager of development services and not to all members of council, because these questions cannot be discussed between us outside of a meeting like this. Any other comments on the deferral before we consider this move to defer? The Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Can we put a date on that deferral? Say, can we be specific so that we're not kicking this down a road? We're just.
It'll be
deferred.
Could we do that? It'll be deferred to the next planning meeting. In February's planning meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'll ask all in favor of the deferral. That's carried. Okay. So Then, sorry, gotta get back to my agenda. All right, so next one is East Hampton Phase 1 subdivision agreement and lifting of holding provision, and we have our staff report from the manager of planning and development.
Nothing really to add on this. Is it's been progressing over a couple years, and we're at the stage of proposing a subdivision agreement for the first 8 lots while we continue to pre-consult with the developer on their next phase, which is to the east of this property.
Okay, so there is a resolution the council approved bylaw 6, 2024 to enter into a subdivision agreement with Launch Property Group Limited for phase 1 of the East Hampton Plan of Subdivision, and the council approved bylaw 7, 2024 to lift the holding provisions on subject lands. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Grace. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, then all in favor? That is carried. All right. So now we are on to bylaws, and we have 2 bylaws there. Anybody wish to consider either of them on their own? Don't see any requests for that. So there's a resolution that bylaws 6, 2024 and 7, 2024 are hereby read a first, second, and third time, finally passed and sealed this 15th day of January, 2024. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Halpin, seconded by Stack. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. And next then is the confirmatory bylaw resolution that bylaw 8, 2024 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the town of Saugeen Shores is hereby read a first, second, and third time, finally passed and sealed this 15th day of January, 2024. Is there a mover and seconder? I got Halpin, I got Mayette. And all in favor? Is carried. And finally, I have a resolution that this regular council meeting of January 15th, 2024 hereby adjourns at 8:06 p.m. Mover and seconder. I have Stack and I have Grace, and all in favor. That is carried. All right. Thanks very much. Council stands adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody.